David Mainse, as you know, is the founder of Crossroads Ministry. 50 years ago, and the anniversary is coming up just in a few months, June the 2nd. 50 years. He started as a young man, and the ministry is still not only going on, it's thriving. And 35 of those 50 years, 100 Huntley Street, live programming all across the nation on a consistent, weekly, daily basis. David, when you started 50 years ago, I'm sure you had no idea that you'd be sitting here 50 years later reflecting on this remarkable history.
Yeah, the only idea I had, I guess, was to do what I had been doing up in Chalk River, Deep River. Actually in Chalk River, when I was 18 years of age, that's Canada's atomic energy area, I was a public school teacher. And I visited the parents of all the children in my class, which was kind of a little different, I guess, for a public school teacher. And that kind of gave me an idea that this is the way to really get inside to help the children and help the families. Well, a number of those children weren't going to Sunday school anywhere, and so I rented a hall and started a Sunday school. And then it was on from there, but always visiting, always out into the homes of people. And when those aerials started to appear on the roofs, I thought, here's a great way to visit. Non-threatening, people are in control. At that time, you know, they had to get up and change the channel, which helped to keep our audience up, I'm sure. But
and you had no, you didn't grow up with a dream to be on television. I mean, television was just coming into existence at that time.
No, when I was growing up, we didn't know that.
No, in fact,
I'm a Depression baby, and
yeah.
you know, the Second World War has vivid memories for me.
Yeah. Now, I was thinking about this as I was preparing mentally for this interview. You're 18 and you're a public school teacher. You have a vision for children in Sunday school. But I remember from your own words, when you were 16, you were a rebel without a cause. You're riding around on a Harley Davidson. You're kind of mad at your dad because he's never around. You're feeling kind of alone and dejected and disconsolate and detached from the world. And you're angry. How is it that 2 years later you're teaching public school and have a vision for kids in Sunday school?
Well, there were 4 young men in my high school class, grade 12. Actually, grade 11, I was in a boarding school and I was asked not to return,
right, because
of exactly what you described. About 4 young men who were brilliant witnesses for Jesus. They wanted to talk about the Lord. They bring it up in history class. They bring up the Lord in whenever. And so I decided that their way of living was superior, and I wanted what they had. Even though my dad was overseas, and of course my mother died when I was 12, and that had kind of set me off in the wrong direction to start with. I was angry at God, but that totally turned around. And I realized eventually that I would be the most selfish person on this planet if I kept the good news about what Jesus does in people's lives to myself.
And this has really been maybe the essential DNA of your whole Crossroads history. I mean, Jesus has really been the focus, has he not?
Absolutely, of course.
Yeah.
And one of my very favorite interviews that I did right on this platform here was with Steve Saint, the son of Nate Saint, the first of the 5 martyrs down in the Amazon, when he brought here the chief now, the man who had actually speared to death his own dad. Sitting here on this set, Steve now calls Minkai dad, and he calls Steve my son. Now, there is no one else in the entire world that could ever, in the universe, that could ever do that except Jesus. And he's the element that's missing in the lives, I think, of most people. He's available, but there are all kinds of things. In fact, we people who claim to represent his name are probably the biggest stumbling block of all in people coming to him. Like Gandhi used to say, I would be a Christian if it wasn't for some of the Christians I've met.
Yeah, if people would just start following Christ. Something early on that encapsulates your view, and as I heard about the first time I thought of Jesus himself washing the feet of the disciples in such a humble, servant-like way. One of the families that you began to bring to Sunday school were very dysfunctional. And the children weren't being fed properly, and in many cases their hygiene was bad. You would go and wash them and feed them and get them ready and then take them to Sunday school. This speaks more to me about who the essential David Mainse is than anything, David.
Well, I wouldn't dwell on that too much,
no,
Jim.
But I
probably I only had to wash them up. It's like when you do it once or twice, it's amazing how they catch on. You know,
but
so
the fact
it
that
wasn't
you did
that
it,
I did that every Sunday.
But you did it. And I also recall my own father, when he recruited you to be his successor at Glad Tidings Tabernacle in Sudbury, Ontario, telling the story, he tells it many times, of you arriving 782 Robinson Drive in a beat-up old car, and the first thing you want to do is see the university, because you thought a ministry of the university would be a good thing. He hops into the back seat and went right through to the floorboards, because the back seat was totally ruined because you're carrying so many kids to Sunday school.
Well, there were no seatbelt laws.
No.
You know, back in the 50s and the early 60s. Yeah. And I can't be arrested for it now, I don't think, but I remember having 17 children in that I think that was maybe a 58 Ford.
Yeah. It sure impressed Dad. And he also loves to tell the story of the board of Glad Tidings, saying, David Mainse, who's David Mainse? As he suggested you as his successor. And he said, well, you may not know him now, but believe me, the day will come when you will. He doesn't claim to be a prophet or the son of a prophet, but he was prophetic.
Well, your dad is 89 now, and he promised me he'd preach my funeral.
Well, there you go. There you go. Well, may you both live forever. David, let's shift a little bit here. Your first broadcasts were from Pembroke, right? I mean, the first place you grew to from the north was Pembroke, right? You started going to the Pembroke station. Then you moved to Sudbury to pastor Glad Tidings, and you brought it to, was it CKNC or CKSO?
CKSO television.
CKSO television. And at that time, was it still a 15-minute show, or did it?
It was 15 minutes, black and white. And from there, North Bay, Timmins, Sault Ste. Marie began to pick it up, and then Quebec City picked it up, and then a miracle, as far as I'm concerned, Channel 9 Toronto, CFTO, decided they wanted to carry it, and that's what cracked open the whole of Canada, you know, when the mother station of the CTV network picked it up.
Now, how did it grow from station to station? Did you have to make presentations to these stations, or did they hear about it?
No, we had a sergeant of police in Sault Ste. Marie, which was the third. Well, actually, from Pembroke to Sudbury, the owner of the Pembroke station wrote to the owner of the Sudbury station to say, this young lad's on here every Saturday night, 11:30 p.m., the original Saturday Night Live, and we'd like to keep it going. Would you be willing to work with him? And so the church board, the deacons of the church there said, yes, we'll support it for 3 months and we'll see what happens. And then Sergeant of Police from Sault Ste. Marie, Cliff Weeks, he called. He wanted it he used to do the safety program on the local station in the Sioux, and Frank Denardis, the manager there, and other Terry Coles up in Timmins and so on. It just opened, the doors just opened, like with no effort on my part. I wasn't out there knocking on doors. Up in Quebec City, a guy you'll know by the name of Vern O'Brien, he went to the local station and took a tape, you know, and said, they said, yes, we'd like to have it.
And these doors were opening for a number of reasons. One is that your program was unique, but also it was the early days of television in Canada.
Yeah.
Do you see yourself as a pioneer?
Well, it was pioneering.
Yeah.
That's true in terms of television, but there were others as well. Herb Barber in Winnipeg, and Mike Horban was up in Prince George, and you know, there were others who were actually doing television programs. Salvation Army had a wonderful TV show that they were producing, released on a number of stations.
My Uncle Don was in Red Deer.
Yes, he had a TV program also.
And then my cousin Willard had one down in Washington.
Okay.
But yours was the one that really caught on nationally. When did you begin to realize that maybe you had a national mandate from the Lord with this program?
A man by the name of Tom Johnstone, who is a hero of mine, he took videotapes from all these Christian programs in Canada, took them into CTV. And I think Murray Chirkover was the head of CTV at the time. And he looked at them all and he told Tom, he said, this young lad from Sudbury is the one that I think is most likely to succeed. So there was favor there from the CTV network. And of course, for years we were on the CTV. The local stations were all independently owned at the time. There were most of the CBC stations were independently owned, and Global, of course, hadn't kicked on yet. And so yeah, it just kept on going. And the churches, when I came to Hamilton, the church there was willing to take on a pastor with an extra briefcase called Crossroads, and to get in behind it financially and support it. And the time came, of course, when I realized that this can't continue, a local church support, nor I could work for the rest of my life and never pay for the thing. And so I believe what the Lord whispered into my heart was, I've got people all across Canada who will stand with you. They'll cooperate to make this happen. And that's what happened. Now, we never even used the word support on the air up until '77 when we went daily. Right. And then the cost of that was so otherwise prohibitive. And I prayed a lot about it, but I think what I heard was not enough people take the time to hear my voice to support this, David. You're going to have to tell people about the challenge and the need that's out there. And so very reluctantly, I began to use the word support. Billy Graham had used that all along, and he was very conservative in terms of his fundraising methods. And I sought to follow that pattern.